On Family Feud, the families standing on that stage are supposed to be on the same team. That is the entire point of the game. You win together or you lose together. But on a Monday afternoon in September 2025, a husband decided that his wife's parents were not part of his team. He decided that the two people who had raised the woman he married, the people who had sacrificed everything to give her the life that he now benefited from, were beneath him. And he said it on national television. He mocked their jobs. He mocked the way they lived. He looked at his own father-in-law and mother-in-law standing beside him on that stage, and he made them feel like they did not belong there. And Steve Harvey, a man who grew up watching his own mother work her fingers raw to give him a chance, stopped the entire game. He stopped it cold, because what that husband was doing was not a game show moment. It was a declaration of contempt for the people who made his entire life possible. What the wife's mother said in response would silence every person in that building, and what was revealed about the father would make the husband wish he had never opened his mouth. I need you to stay through this whole story, because the ending is something you will never see coming. If you are not subscribed to this channel, hit that button right now and turn on the notification bell. You do not want to miss a single moment. Let me tell you what happened. The family on stage was the Rivera-Hayes family from San Antonio, Texas, and the lineup told you everything about the two worlds that had collided in this marriage. Standing together on one team were 35-year-old Carmen Rivera-Hayes, her husband 37-year-old Brandon Hayes, and Carmen's parents, 60-year-old Luis Rivera and 58-year-old Gloria Rivera. Carmen's younger brother, 30-year-old Miguel Rivera, rounded out the five. Luis and Gloria Rivera had come to the United States from El Salvador in 1989, the year their country's civil war was finally winding down. They had left behind everything. Family, friends, the only home they had ever known. They arrived in San Antonio with 2 suitcases, a 2-year-old daughter named Carmen, and the shared conviction that whatever waited for them in America was better than what they were leaving behind. They had been right, but the price of being right had been extraordinarily high. Luis had worked in construction for 30 years. 30 years of pouring concrete, laying tile, framing walls, and roofing houses in the brutal San Antonio heat. His hands were a map of that work, calloused and scarred and permanently bent from decades of gripping tools. His back had been operated on twice. His knees ached every morning. He was 60 years old, and his body belonged to a man 20 years older because he had spent 3 decades building homes he could never afford to live in so that his children could live in homes he could never have imagined. Luis still worked 4 days a week because the pension did not cover everything, and because Luis Rivera did not know how to stop working. It was not in his vocabulary. It was not in his DNA. Gloria had worked as a housekeeper for a hotel chain for 22 years before transitioning to in-home elder care, where she spent her days looking after an 87-year-old retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Patterson. Gloria bathed Mrs. Patterson, prepared her meals, managed her medications, and sat with her in the afternoons reading aloud from romance novels because Mrs. Patterson's eyesight had failed. Gloria earned $16 an hour. She worked 5 days a week. She had never taken a sick day because she was afraid that if she missed a day, someone might replace her, and Mrs. Patterson would not understand why her Gloria had not come. Carmen had been the first in her family to attend college. She had graduated from the University of Texas at San Antonio with a degree in business administration and now worked as a procurement manager for a healthcare supply company. Miguel had followed her to college and earned his degree in kinesiology. He worked as a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic. 2 children, 2 college degrees, 2 professional careers, all built on the foundation of a construction worker and a caregiver who had walked out of a civil war with nothing and built everything. Brandon Hayes had grown up in a different world. He was from a well-established family in Austin. His father was a retired bank executive. His mother had been a real estate broker. Brandon had attended a private high school, graduated from Baylor University, and worked as a commercial real estate analyst. He earned $140,000 a year. He wore designer clothes. He drove a luxury SUV. And from the very beginning of his relationship with Carmen, he had been uncomfortable with her parents. He never called it discomfort. He would never have used that word, but the evidence was clear. He avoided family dinners at Luis and Gloria's modest home in the south side of San Antonio. When Carmen's parents visited, Brandon found reasons to be elsewhere. He corrected Gloria's English in the same casual, smiling way that made it impossible to call out without being told you were overreacting. At their wedding, he had seated Carmen's family at a table near the kitchen, far from the head table, citing space constraints. Carmen had noticed. She had said nothing because she loved Brandon and because she wanted to believe it was not what it looked like. But it was exactly what it looked like. Brandon looked at Louis's calloused hands and saw manual labor. He looked at Gloria's simple clothes and saw a woman who cleaned houses. He looked at the Rivera family's small home and their older car and their accented English, and he saw people who did not fit the life he had built for himself. He did not see sacrifice. He did not see courage. He did not see the fact that his wife's intelligence, her work ethic, her determination, everything he claimed to love about her, had been forged in the furnace of exactly the life he looked down on. There was something else. Something that only Carmen and Miguel knew. 6 months before the taping, Louis had been diagnosed with early-stage kidney disease. The decades of physically demanding labor, the dehydration from working in Texas heat, the years without health insurance before the ACA, all of it had taken a toll. Louis needed to reduce his work schedule. His doctor had told him to stop working entirely. But Louis could not stop. The medical bills were accumulating. Gloria's income was not enough. And Louis Rivera, at 60 years old with failing kidneys and a broken-down body, continued to show up at construction sites 4 days a week because that is what he had always done. He provided, no matter the cost. Carmen had been quietly helping with the medical bills, transferring money to her parents' account each month without telling Brandon. She knew what he would say. She could already hear the lecture about financial priorities and how her parents should have planned better. She could not bear to hear it. The game started with the Rivera-Hayes family facing the Thompson family from Nashville. Steve Harvey went down the line for introductions. When he reached Louis, Steve asked what he did for a living. Louis stood straight despite the pain in his back and said in his accented English, "I work construction, Mr. Harvey, 30 years, I build houses." Steve looked at Louis's hands and nodded with genuine respect. 30 years, sir, that is dedication. When he reached Gloria, she smiled warmly and said she was a caregiver. Steve told her that was beautiful work. The audience applauded for both of them. Brandon stood at the end of the line, polished and professional, waiting for his turn. The first 2 rounds went smoothly. The family played well together. Louis actually gave a number 2 answer in the first round, and the audience cheered loudly for him. Gloria contributed a solid answer in the second round. Carmen was sharp. Miguel was fast. Brandon played competently. Everything was going fine. The third round brought the question. Steve read it from the card. Name something embarrassing about your in-laws. Standard Family Feud fare. The kind of question that usually gets lighthearted answers like bad cooking, too many holiday photos, or calling at the wrong time. Brandon was at the podium. He hit the buzzer first. Steve turned to him. All right, Brandon, name something embarrassing about your in-laws. Brandon looked at the camera and gave a small, practiced laugh. Then he said, "Where do I start? My father-in-law is 60 years old and still digging ditches for a living. My mother-in-law cleans some old lady's house for minimum wage. They have been in this country for 35 years and they still cannot speak proper English. That is not embarrassing. Come on, Steve." He said it with a smile. He said it like he was being charming. He said it like the audience was going to laugh along with him and validate everything he was feeling. Nobody laughed. The studio became a vacuum, not even the sound of breathing. Just the electrical hum of the stage lights and the silent, seething fury of 200 people who had just watched a man disrespect his wife's immigrant parents on national television. The Thompson family across the stage looked physically ill. Steve Harvey's face went through a transformation that the cameras captured in merciless detail. Every trace of the host persona evaporated and was replaced by something raw and deeply personal. Louis stood in the family line. His weathered face, the face of a man who had survived a civil war and rebuilt his life from nothing, registered the words with a small, almost imperceptible flinch. Then he went still, perfectly still. The way a man goes still when he has been insulted so many times in his life that he has learned to absorb it without breaking. Gloria's hand found Louis's arm. She held on. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was level. Carmen looked at Brandon with an expression that was not shock. It was the final confirmation of something she had been hoping was not true. The last thread of benefit of the doubt had just snapped. Her face hardened into something cold and absolute. Miguel took a step toward Brandon before catching himself, his fists clenched, his jaw locked tight with the effort of restraint. Steve Harvey put his cards down. He walked to the center of the stage with a deliberate, measured pace that the audience had learned to recognize as the precursor to something significant. "Sir, I need you to stand right there and listen to me, because I am about to tell you something you clearly do not understand." His voice was low and controlled and vibrating with intensity. "Your father-in-law has been building houses in this country for 30 years. 30 years in the Texas heat with his hands. He did not do that for fun. He did that so his daughter could go to college, so she could get a degree, so she could meet you. Every house he built, every wall he framed, every roof he laid in 110-degree heat was a brick in the road that led his daughter to the life you now share. You are living in the house that man built, not a physical house, a life. He built the life you are standing in right now. The audience erupted. The ovation was fierce and immediate. Steve was not finished. He turned and gestured toward Gloria. And your mother-in-law takes care of an 87-year-old woman who has nobody else. She bathes her, she feeds her, she reads to her. She gives that woman dignity in the last chapter of her life. That is not minimum wage work, sir. That is sacred work. And the fact that you just reduced it to an embarrassment on my stage tells me everything I need to know about what you see when you look at these people. You do not see sacrifice. You see a paycheck, and that makes you the most embarrassing person on this stage. Miguel stepped forward. The 30-year-old physical therapist was shaking with controlled anger. Brandon, I want you to look at my father's hands. Look at them. Louis, understanding what his son was doing, raised his hands. The cameras zoomed in. Every callus, every scar, every joint swollen from decades of manual labor was visible in high definition. Those hands built 14 houses last year alone. They have built hundreds in 30 years. They built the bathroom you shower in, the walls you sleep behind, the roof over your head when it rains. Those hands put me through college. Those hands paid for Carmen's books and her tuition and her cap and gown. Everything you say you love about my sister, those hands made it possible. Then came the revelation. Carmen stepped to the center of the stage. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were blazing. Brandon, there is something you need to know. My father has kidney disease. He was diagnosed 6 months ago. His doctor told him to stop working. He cannot stop because the medical bills keep coming and the insurance does not cover everything. He is 60 years old with failing kidneys, and he still goes to construction sites 4 days a week because that is the kind of man he is. He provides, no matter what it costs him. She paused and let the information settle. I have been sending my parents money every month for 6 months to help with the bills. I did not tell you because I knew exactly what you would say. I knew you would call it a waste. I knew you would say they should have planned better. I knew you would find a way to make their suffering about your budget. So I hid it. I hid the fact that my father is sick because I was more afraid of your judgment than I was of asking for your help. The revelation hit the studio like a shockwave. The audience was weeping. The Thompson family across the stage was weeping. Steve Harvey pressed both hands against his face and took a moment to collect himself. The image of a daughter hiding her father's illness from her husband because she feared his contempt was devastating in a way that transcended the game show format. This was not entertainment. This was a family in crisis. Then Gloria spoke. The 58-year-old caregiver who had been silent throughout the entire confrontation, who had held her husband's arm and kept her chin level while her son-in-law mocked her on national television, stepped forward. She spoke in her accented English, clearly and without apology, and every person in that studio listened. Brandon, when you marry someone, you marry their family. That is how it works. You do not get to choose the parts you like and throw away the rest. My husband and I came to this country with nothing. We did not have education. We did not have money. We did not have the English, but we had our hands and we had our faith and we had each other. And we built a life, not a big life. Not a fancy life, but an honest life. A life that gave our children everything we never had. She paused. You are embarrassed by us. I have seen it for years, the way you avoid our home, the way you correct my words, the way you seated us at the back of your wedding. I saw all of it, and I said nothing because I did not want to make trouble for Carmen. Her voice strengthened. But my husband is sick, and my daughter is hiding it from you because she is ashamed of your reaction. That is the moment I stopped being silent. Because when a daughter cannot ask her own husband for help because he looks down on her parents, something is broken. Not in us. In you. We are not the embarrassment, Brandon. The embarrassment is that you married into a family of survivors and all you can see is what we do not have. The standing ovation was massive and sustained. Gloria stood in the center of the stage, 58 years old, her English accented, her clothes simple, her body tired from years of labor, and she owned that room completely. Not with volume, not with aggression, with the unassailable dignity of a woman who knew exactly who she was and refused, finally, to be diminished by anyone. Steve turned to Brandon. Sir, this woman just told you the truth about yourself, and I want you to listen to what she said. She said you married into a family of survivors. She is right. Your wife's parents survived a civil war. They survived immigration. They survived poverty. They survived 30 years of backbreaking work, and they raised 2 college-educated children who are contributing members of society. That is not embarrassing. That is one of the most extraordinary things a family can accomplish. And if you cannot see that, If you genuinely look at these people and see something to be ashamed of, then the problem is not their paychecks or their accents. The problem is your character. Steve stopped the game. He told the production team the family would receive the full prize equivalent for the rounds completed. Then he made an announcement that changed everything. His foundation would cover Luis Rivera's outstanding medical bills in their entirety. The audience gasped. Steve was not finished. The foundation would also provide ongoing support for Luis's treatment, including specialist referrals and transportation to appointments. The total commitment was estimated at over $40,000. Luis, the 60-year-old construction worker who had never stopped providing for anyone, covered his face with his scarred hands and wept. It was the first time Carmen had ever seen her father cry. Gloria held him. Miguel held him. Carmen held him. Brandon stood apart, watching the family he had mocked embrace the father he had called embarrassing, and the isolation on his face was total. Steve addressed Brandon one final time. "Sir, I am not going to kick you off this stage, but I am going to ask you to do something. I want you to walk over to your father-in-law and I want you to shake his hand. Not because I am telling you to, because you owe it to him. That man's hands are broken from building the life you live in. The least you can do is hold one of them and tell him you are sorry." Brandon walked to Luis. He stood in front of the 60-year-old construction worker whose hands he had mocked minutes earlier. He reached out and took Luis's hand. The camera captured the contrast. Brandon's smooth, manicured fingers wrapped around Luis's calloused, scarred palm. Brandon's voice broke completely. "Mr. Rivera, I am sorry. I have been disrespectful to you and to Mrs. Rivera. You raised the best woman I have ever known, and I have been too arrogant and too stupid to honor that. I am sorry." Luis looked at his son-in-law for a long moment. Then he pulled Brandon into a hug, not a polite hug, a real one. The hug of a man who had survived worse than insults and who understood that forgiveness was not about the person who was wrong. It was about refusing to carry bitterness in a life that was already heavy enough. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the response was extraordinary. The clip went viral, reaching over 98 million views across platforms in the first week. But it was the image of the handshake that became the defining visual. The smooth hand and the scarred hand, clasped together on a game show stage. That image was shared tens of millions of times. It was used in articles about class, about immigration, about the invisible labor that builds visible prosperity. It was printed as a poster and displayed in schools and community centers. It became a symbol that transcended the episode and entered the broader cultural conversation about who deserves respect and how we measure the value of a life. Gloria's speech went equally viral. Her line, "You married into a family of survivors and all you can see is what we do not have," was quoted in immigration advocacy campaigns, in sermons, in commencement speeches, and in family therapy sessions. The hashtag Family of Survivors trended globally for 8 days. People used it to share stories of their own immigrant parents and grandparents, the sacrifices that had been made, the indignities that had been endured, and the pride that the next generation carried because of it. The hashtag became a celebration of working-class immigrant families that resonated across every demographic. The impact on the family was immediate and lasting. Brandon entered counseling to address the classism that had been embedded in his worldview since childhood. His therapist helped him trace the pattern back to his upbringing, where value had always been equated with professional achievement and material success. The therapy was uncomfortable and necessary. Brandon began attending Sunday dinners at Luis and Gloria's home. He sat at their table. He ate Gloria's pupusas. He asked Luis about his work. He listened, really listened, to the stories of what it had taken to build a life from nothing. Slowly, painfully, he began to see what he had been blind to for years. Carmen stopped hiding the financial support she provided her parents. She told Brandon about the monthly transfers, about the medical bills, about all of it. Brandon did not lecture. He did not complain. He matched her contributions dollar for dollar. The first time a check arrived at Luis and Gloria's home with Brandon's name on it alongside Carmen's, Gloria called her daughter and said in Spanish, "Maybe there is hope for that boy yet." Luis's medical treatment improved significantly with the foundation's support and the combined financial help from Carmen and Brandon. He reduced his work schedule to 2 days a week. His nephrologist reported stable kidney function for the first time since the diagnosis. Luis spent his new free time volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, building houses for families who reminded him of his own 35 years ago. When a reporter asked him why he was still building when his body needed rest, Luis smiled and said, "My hands do not know how to be empty. They only know how to build." Gloria continued caring for Mrs. Patterson. She also started a support group at her church for immigrant caregivers. women who worked in private homes providing essential care for elderly and disabled clients while navigating the challenges of language, documentation, and isolation. The group met weekly and provided practical support, emotional solidarity, and the simple comfort of being understood by people who shared the same experience. Gloria called the group Still Here, and the name captured everything: the resilience, the persistence, and the quiet defiance of women who had survived displacement, poverty, and disrespect and who were still standing. 6 months after the episode aired, Family Feud brought the family back. All 5 of them walked onto the stage together, including Brandon. The difference was visible. Brandon stood beside Louis, not apart from him. When Steve asked how things were going, Carmen spoke first. "Mr. Harvey, my father's kidneys are stable. My husband eats my mother's cooking every Sunday, and my parents' medical bills are paid. Those are the 3 things that matter most to me right now." Brandon spoke next. His voice carried genuine humility. "Mr. Harvey, I stood on this stage 6 months ago and called my in-laws embarrassing. My father-in-law builds houses with his bare hands. My mother-in-law takes care of an 87-year-old woman like she is family. They survived a war, came to a new country, and raised 2 college graduates. I was embarrassed by that. That is the most impressive thing in my entire family, both sides, and I was too arrogant to see it." He turned to Louis. "Mr. Rivera, you are the hardest working man I have ever known. I am sorry it took me this long to say it." Steve closed with words that resonated. "I grew up in Cleveland. My mama worked hard. She worked jobs that some people would look down on. But those jobs put food on our table and a roof over our heads and gave me a chance to become who I am today. Every person who builds with their hands, who cleans with their hands, who cares for other people with their hands, is building something bigger than a house or a clean room. They are building the future. Luis Rivera built the future with his hands for 30 years. Gloria Rivera gave dignity to people who needed it. Their children stand here today as living proof that the American dream is not about where you start. It is about what you build." He looked into the camera. "If your parents sacrificed for you, honor that sacrifice. If your in-laws came from humble beginnings, be humble enough to see what that required. And if you ever find yourself embarrassed by the people who made your life possible, remember Luis Rivera's hands, because those hands built more in 1 year than most people build in a lifetime. And they deserve to be held, not mocked. If this story moved you, I need you to do something. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with every child of immigrants, every son and daughter of working parents, every person whose family sacrificed everything so the next generation could have more. Share it and tell them that their parents' work is not an embarrassment. It is the foundation everything else stands on. And the people who built it deserve more respect than anyone else in the room. I will see you in the next one.